This
So everybody
conference will now be recorded.
everybody can say hello as we get started over here. Okay. There we go. Okay. So very often there is a tremendous amount of disinformation, not just misinformation, but disinformation about Judaism as Torah Judaism um, understands Judaism to be. Because very often when you're listening to NPR and they interview a Jew, right? So you'll have a statement like, "Well, I'm Jewish, so of course we don't believe in the hereafter." Right? And I think to myself, like, hey, if you want to spout your beliefs, it's a free country. You can say whatever you want, but just don't mis and disrepresent Judaism. Right? I don't believe, fair enough. It's a free country. Don't believe, believe. I'd love to have a discussion with you at some point, but there's just so much mis and disinformation out there that it's troubling. So that's why I like to go through the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides, and in the Sidurim. Sorry, it's on page one. Get a few more, Yoshi. Thank you. It's on page 178. Those who have your Art Scroll Sidurim, your RCA Art Scroll Sidurim, it's on page 178. Also, it's very important to go through this because part a major part of a becoming of a Jewish journey, right, is knowing what to do. And it is halacha heavy, and it needs to be halacha heavy because, again, from a Torah point of view, right, this is a commitment that someone is voluntarily taking on. And therefore, the example I like to give, you can't say, go to the Marines, I want to join the Marines, but I just don't like doing push-ups. Yeah. All right, so I'm happy to join the Marines, but no jogging and no push-ups. And the recruitment officer will say to you, we appreciate your patriotism and your wish to join the Marines, but you don't make the rules of the Marines. So if you like to join the Marines, so this is what we do. And it includes quite a bit of push-ups and running, right? But you don't have to join the Marines. But if you do join the Marines, this is what's expected. Right? And that is why there is the process is halacha heavy, right? In terms of what we do, what we don't do, when we do it, how we do it, right? On Pesach, right? Eat wherever you want, but don't eat these things. Sukkot, eat whatever you want, but don't eat in those places. It's like it's a regimen. It's a regimen which is really based on, as we say over and over, the underlying principle of every mitzvah to recognize that it's not a free for all. We are living in God's world. And therefore, right, we want to live in God's world. So then there are, hello, Simone. Good. Don't worry, we're just getting started. Right? So therefore, right, it's necessary to have, for us, for a person on a Jewish journey to know these rules, know these parameters, and to accept these parameters. Because like we said, the parameters, it's not just jumping through hoops. The whole idea is every mitzvah is there to give us God awareness. The challenge is that very often it becomes rote, and we can make 100 blessings a day without ever once thinking about God, and that's a calamity. That's a calamity. But that's a danger. That's a danger that we you know, that is out there. And that's why it takes for everyone, whether a person who's going through a Jewish journey or someone who was born Jewish and is, still trying to do my best, each day, 60 years after the journey began, right? It's a challenge. It's a challenge to stay focused. It's a challenge, but the mitzvot are there to give us this God awareness. So again, it's necessary to make this process and the study and the program, it's necessary to make it halacha heavy because we're joining the Marines, and that's what it involves. At the same time, we don't want to lose the forest because of the trees, and we don't want to lose what this is all about. And this is all about God connection in our lives, and it's understanding what are the fundamental belief principles of Judaism that we are coming into, that we are signing up to. I'm sorry, if everybody could just 1 second. Leticia, nothing personal, but I'm muting you. Okay? Nothing personal. Right? And you're more than welcome to unmute if you want to speak up, and otherwise we're getting a little bit of a bounce back. Okay, so the Rambam gives us 13. The Rambam gives us 13 principles, and these are basic fundamental principles of Jewish faith. Not to say that there aren't and haven't been other great earlier rabbis who didn't necessarily agree exactly on every single one of these, but I would say that this has become the mainstream approach. Okay. Number one, Ani ma'amin, be'emunah shalema, I believe with complete faith. Shahaborei yitbarach shemo, that the Creator, blessed is He, borei umanhig l'chol haberuim, that the Creator, blessed He, is the one who creates, umanhig, and the one who guides. Right? In Hebrew, a driver is a nahag. Right? If you're ever in Israel, and you're by a bus stop and the bus is pulling away, you hear everybody yell, nahag, nahag, wait, nahag, driver, wait. Right? Nahag. God is the manhig. He's the driver. He drives that which takes place. L'chol haberuim, for all of his creatures. This is v'hu levado, and he alone, asa, did, oseh, does, v'yaseh, and will do l'kol hamasim, all that which takes place. This is, well, Rav Moshe puts it very beautifully, Shabbos and Yom Tovim, the Sabbath and the Jewish holidays. They are the two bedrock principles of faith that we have. Shabbat expresses our belief, or we do, as we've explained a number of times, our belief in God as a creator. God stopped. He didn't rest, didn't get tired on the seventh day. He stopped creating. He stopped fashioning and altering and changing the world. Comes the Sabbath, what do? We show our belief in God as a creator. That comes the Shabbat, we stop creating. We stop altering and changing and modifying the world to meet our needs. It's not a day of rest. It would be a lot more restful for me to get into my car and drive for 5 minutes to get to shul instead of walking 20 minutes. I love the walk, especially when I can walk with Natalie. But in terms of rest, a lot more restful if I can get into my car and drive. You disagree? I disagree. Okay. I get rest when I walk. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Right? Now, well, you'll agree with me on this one. It's no lack of rest for me to flip on a light switch. Right? That's not very exertive. Okay? But that's altering and changing the world. So we abstain from doing that to show our belief in God as a creator. Shabbat, God as a creator. The holidays is God's involvement in this world. Active involvement, active engagement. And not just for the entire nation, but also for each and every, individual. And that is the concept known as hashgacha pratit, divine individual, hashgacha, providence, overseeing, guidance, prati. What is prati? Personal. Personal providence. God cares what happens to you, to each and every one of us. Not only does he care, he's involved. And if a situation comes your way, it's not this haphazard, but why me? It's for a reason. And it's something that you can gain from this encounter. Whether it is a pleasant encounter, whether it is a very unpleasant encounter. We're supposed to have our ears perked up to understand why, what. Now there actually is. I'll share the link when I find the link on our WhatsApp group. There's a beautiful. This is sung beautifully by a Jewish music group named Dvekas, and this animamin, right? Hu boreu manhig, hu manhig l'chol haberuim, v'hu levado asa v'yoseh. Oseviase, asa oseviase, l'chol hamasim. Beautiful song. I don't do it justice. It's a beautiful song. And there was a point in our life when Natalie came home, and I was home already, and she found me sitting on the floor with my guitar, singing this song over and over and over and over. And she said, "Is everything okay?" I said, "We'll talk soon." All right. And a few minutes later, "Are you ready to talk?" I said, "I need a few more rounds of the song, and then I'll be ready to talk." Right. And we were going through, right? Something had happened that really knocked us off balance quite a bit. And I was being mechazek myself, as the term goes. I was trying to strengthen myself in this is from God. And there's a reason for it. And we're not sure where this is going to lead to, but let's put on our seatbelts. And God's taking care of us, right? More than a parent takes care of us. And we know how much we want to do for our kids, and we know how much our parents want to do for us. And here is the one who is all able, all knowing, and all in, all willing. So there's good here. There's good here. And if one door is closing, another door is opening up. We just don't see it yet, but let's put on our seatbelt. But that's what this idea is. That life doesn't just happen. And situations that we're faced with don't just happen. Right? The way I like to best describe it, I'm not a big card player, but the way I like to describe it is we don't choose the cards. We play the hand. Okay? All we can do is play the hand. But who is choosing the cards? God chooses the cards. Why these cards and not those cards? That we don't know. That we're not privy to. And famously in the parashiyot that we had now, when God appears to Moses at the burning bush And Moses says, when I go to the children of Israel, I say to them, God appeared to me, what name should I use? And God says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Right? Translated as, I will be that which I will be. Okay? And there are many, many, many different that, but the most basic, Rabbi Sachs says so beautifully, you think you'll be able to predict me. Oh, for sure, God's going to make sure that this happens or that happens, or God will never let that happen. Guess what? I will be that which I will be. And you're not going to figure it out. And you're going to be scratching your head. Right? In the end of last week's parsha, the start of this week's parsha, Moshe was scratching his head. And he said, the time I went to Pharaoh, it got worse. You haven't saved them. Why have you done bad to this nation? And as we discussed this morning, you can catch the YouTube, it's already up on those who want to watch it. Moshe, Hashem's answer is, by the Elokim el Moshe, vayomer elav ani Hashem. Elokim, which is the midah, the attribute of judgment, said to Moshe, guess what? Ani Hashem. Yukei Vavkei. I'm God, meaning the attribute of mercy. That which you see as justice, as harsh, actually is mercy. But we don't see the whole story. But as parents, we know sometimes we have to discipline. I remember that for me, when I think I was about 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, something happened to me that I thought at the time, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But I'm sure when I get older, it won't be quite as bad. But right now, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. What was it? My father made me go to a ballet. Could you imagine that? An 8-year-old boy. I brought my transistor radio. I listened to the Knick game. That's what I did at the ballet. Huh? He didn't make me dance. No leotards. But he made me go. Right? You know, as a parent, sometimes we push something onto our kids, right? Which is, I guess that was my best. I'm not sure. But my father suddenly thought it was my best. Right? Right? That's his first animan. Life does not just happen. What's the word I'm looking for? Life is not just, help me out.
That doesn't happen to you, it happens for you?
Yeah, but there's a certain word. Life is not just haphazard. I used already. Life is not random. That's what I'm looking for. Life is not random. Right? So this number one has these two overriding fundamental principles of Judaism. God is the creator, and God is actively engaged in all that happens. And it's interesting. The world used to scoff at the creationists. When I went to high school, so I remember my science teacher saying, listen, I'm teaching you guys science. I was at a yeshiva high school. So whatever your rabbis want to tell you in the morning, that's when they're teaching you. In the afternoon, I'm teaching you science and the constant state theory. The world always existed. There was no point of creation. That's what science teaches. Okay. Until science realized that this ever-expanding universe, if it's ever-expanding, it means there was a point, well, let's go in rewind. Ever-expanding, ever-contracting, ever-contracting, ever-contracting to a point of Big Bang. So all of a sudden, the entire world agrees with Hu Borei. There was a point of creation. They agree with the first word of the Torah, which is Bereshit, in the beginning. They're still working on Bara Elokim, God created, right? There was a Big Bang, but they have no thoughts of, well, what made this Big Bang happen? Or who was the Big Banger, right? That they don't touch upon. But this idea of creation, the world has come around to accepting. There was the point when it all began. Okay, and an important point is to add in at this. I'd like to add in there is no contradictions between Torah and science. There is no contradiction between Torah and science. Torah is telling us the blueprint of what happened. It's the inside scoop of what happened. Science uses methods to, from the evidence here, let's work our way back and understand what happened. There are many discrepancies between Torah and science today, and that is either that science has not yet gotten it right, or we are misunderstanding Torah. But there cannot be any contradiction between what God said, God letting us know what happened, and what the evidence indicates what happened. One way is working forward, the other way is working backwards. Okay, so that is number one, and that is such an important principle of faith of Judaism. Life is not random. And we take it a step further. If God created, that means God created you. That means there was a purpose for you. There's a need for you. This world would not be complete were it not for you. And then we spend our life trying to figure out exactly what is it that what role am I supposed to be playing, right? Within the parameters of person's Jewish, person becoming Jewish, within the parameters of acting as a Jew, but what role do I play? There are so many roles to play. Okay. Number two, Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema, she'aborei baruch shemo hu yachid, ve'ein yichidut kamohu b'shum panim, v'hu levado Elokeinu haya hoveh v'yiyeh. I believe with a complete faith. Creator, blessed is his name, is, I don't like unique, sorry. Yachid is singular, is one. Shema Yisroel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the Jewish pledge of allegiance. Except Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. Very similar to what Hashem said to Moshe, the first pasuk, the first verse of this week's Torah reading. Elokim, justice. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hashem, mercy. It's all one. And there is no oneness like him. And he alone is our God, or is the force of the world. Haya, he was. Hoveh, he is. The Yihiyeh, and he will be. Now it's interesting. The different names that we have for God are, for the most part, borrowed terms. We say, we refer to God as Elokim, which means powers. That's not a unique name for God. We refer to idolatry as Elohim Acherim, other powers, because they worship the sun, they worship the wind, they worship the ocean, they worship the Nile, they worship their kings, they worship those in power. Judges, Torah judges, the Torah calls them Elohim, because they are powers, right? They have the power to enact the laws of the Torah. Hashem says to Moshe in these parshiot, you will be an Elohim to Paro. Not that you'll be a god to Paro, but you will be in a position of power over Paro. The way, right, we never pronounce the Yud followed by the Hey, followed by the Vav in the Hey. That's that group, the J whatever witnesses, right? We don't pronounce that name. How do we pronounce it? As if it's written Aleph Dalid Nun Yud. When we're davening, we pronounce right. That means, right, Adoni means my master. So that name of Aleph Dalid Nun Yud that we say we're making a blessing, Baruch Atah, right? So that is using the term master. God is a melech. God is the king. These are all terms that we're familiar with. The one word that we use that we're not familiar with in another context is that unspoken name of God. On Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would give the blessing, would say the vidoy, and would say this name, and everyone would hear the name. What would they do? They would all bow down, prostrate themselves on the ground, and on our Yom Kippur afternoon service, when we're going through that which the Kohen would do, and then the Chazan, the leader, says, and the Kohen Gadol, when he pronounced God's name, and right, and everyone would bow down, we all bow down. When we don't hear him say that name, the name's only said in the temple. But when he says, and the Kohen would say that ineffable name, then we all bow down. Okay? So that name, Yud, Hey, Vav, followed by the Hey, very, very interesting. Right? We say it stands for Haya, God was, Hoveh, God is, Yeh, God will be, as he said over here. He was, is, and always will be. But it's deeper than that, my friends. If you take the word Haya and write that down, Hey, Yud, Hey, and then superimpose on that the word Hoveh, is, and then superimpose upon that the word Yihiyeh, you have Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. If you're actually writing that, put some dashes in between. Okay? So what that means, it's not what we think. Oh, God was. That was yesterday. God is. That's tonight, 8 o'clock. God will be. That's 8:30. No. God is, was, is, and will be. Which means that we are stuck in this realm of time. God is beyond time. Bereshit, the Gemara says, was also a creation. What was created then? Time. In the beginning, there's a beginning. What's created? Time. Ramban, one of the classic commentators, Maimonides, says there what science also later came to understand, that time, before there's matter, there is no time. Time relates to matter. When there's matter, then there's time. Time began with this creation of ours. God is beyond the realm of time. We are stuck in time. And that understanding, so we say in number 2, God was, is, and always will be. It's not that he was, he is, and he will be. He is, was, is, and will be. There is no time realm that envelops, that God is within. God is beyond time. And this is helpful when it comes to one of the paradoxes. And there are paradoxes. And it's okay to have paradoxes. And it's okay to not completely understand. If we're talking about a God, then we're not going to understand everything. If we're still trying to understand a single cell in our body, I mentioned a couple of years ago when Devorah was starting her undergrad, I took biology with her, so to speak. She was taking it online because of COVID, everything was closed up. So I was taking it along with her, studying along with her. And it was the most incredible Musar Sefer, the most inspiring. It inspired me towards my belief in God, just seeing all that's going on in a single cell. That no factory that we could build can come close to doing what a cell does. It powers itself. It's just crazy. It's just beyond. But I love the fact that we're talking about the mitochondria, and they had a whole section on a part of the mitochondria that scientists now are trying to figure out what it does. So if we can't understand a single cell of the billions of cells in our body, and we think, well, it's got to make sense to me. And this is an area where Orthodox Judaism is so different than some of the other strains of Judaism. Not that I'm an authority in other strains. My understanding, what I've heard from people who have spoken to some of the rabbis down the block over here, right, that when it comes to reform, at least, right, you don't have to do anything. If it resonates with you, then you can do it, right? If it doesn't resonate, then there's no reason to do it, right? Which means that God is as smart as I am. And if it makes sense to me, my brain is what's going to be Kovea. My brain decides what is worthwhile. If it makes sense to me, I'll do it. Doesn't make sense to me, there's no reason to do it. Right? And I always say, I don't want to serve a God who's as smart as I am. Right? If he could only do what I could understand, that's pretty sad. That's very, very sad. So one of the paradoxes that the Rambam, Maimonides, brings up is, and we'll come again later on in these Ikarim, is that God has absolute knowledge. We call that Yediyah. God has knowledge, and yet we have Bechira, we have free will. Well, if God knows what I'm going to do I really have free will? That's a paradox that the Rambam, Maimonides, brings up and doesn't answer. And one of the commentators on the Rambam, known as the Rabbi, he says, you're not acting in a smart manner. Why are you putting questions and doubts into people's minds if you're not going to answer it? And there are those that explain the reason the Rambam did that is to let us know he didn't want someone to come along later and say, oh, I've got a great question on Judaism. And I'll tell you something, if the Rambam had thought of this, he also would have dropped the whole thing. So the Rambam poses the question, doesn't give an answer, and continues on living and teaching and writing as the Rambam, as the great Maimonides. But how is it, what is a way that it can be understood? So Rav Dessler gives a very beautiful explanation. He says like this, my life starts over here and ends over there. This is the table of my life. And there's a little hole in this tablecloth. And slowly it moves across. And wherever that little hole is, we could see what's on the table. That's my present. Whatever's covered, that's my past. Whatever's up ahead, we'll see what's going to be. That's my future. That's this cloak of time. But, how about that? Right? If I could look under that cloak, if that cloak does not cloak my vision at all, then what was, is, and will be is all here. So imagine I wasn't going to share this, but I have access to a time machine, guys. Okay? And I visited here. Right? Last week I zoomed up to this moment and I took some notes. And I wrote down over here, let's see, Simone's going to be sitting exactly to my right wearing a stocking hat. Okay. And Ladarrell's going to have a Reebok sweatshirt. And Danielle's going to be drinking from a big silver cup. Right? And so on. Right? Now, did you have a choice where to sit, which hat to wear, which sweatshirt, which cup? You had perfectly free will. The fact that I knew, because of my time machine capabilities, I know what you chose, that's okay. But you had full decision-making process, full free will in the process. So when we say that God is not bound by time, that is a concept that we really can't wrap our heads around. But that is a helpful piece of knowledge to have. Yes, Gabriella.
So you mentioned So I was able to listen to the Parsha recording after, and you mentioned how I think this is Sforno points out how there are different words used to describe Paro's heart and how
Yeah.
it was hardened, and so one of the words is like the root is chazak
Right.
because he was strengthened to do what he was going to do, meaning that he had the free will and his free will was never taken away. So my question is, like, does that apply to us as well? Does it have to be a specific circumstance where Hashem gives you the
Okay.
chazak, or is it like a
Okay.
constant thing?
Okay. So what Gabriella touched upon, we discussed in this morning's Chumash class a bit of. The simple reading is that God took away Paro's free will for the last 5 plagues. Okay? In which case, it was no longer a test for him. And he won't be held accountable for not acquiescing at that point, according to that more rigid approach. That wasn't the challenge, right? Actually, at that point, it was him getting what he deserved to get. Okay? But in general, our understanding is, and this is in the Mesilat Yesharim, right? And most I know the RCC and Rabbi Ru all have you guys knowing or reading through, being familiar with at least the first, I think, 2 chapters of Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just. But the concept there is that God does not give us a challenge that we cannot handle. Right? The way I like to describe it is like a personal trainer. A personal trainer pushes you to the limits of what you can do, but won't ask you to do 300 push-ups. Right? But he'll push. He or she will push that latent abilities that you didn't know you fully had will come to the fore. Wow, I really can do 50 push-ups. I didn't think I could. But he said, give me another one, another 2, another one. Okay, just one more. And wow, I got to 50. That's what the Nisyonot are. And God gives us, the Paro example is a pretty unique time in history. But in general, a challenge that we have, if it's a Nisayon, sometimes it's not a Nisayon. Sometimes sometimes we can't prevent something from happening. In that case, the Nisayon is, how am I going to play the cards? Right? Sometimes I can play the cards and win. Sometimes I have a hand that's a losing hand. Okay, how am I going to play that? I can't take the jackpot over here. I'm not going to clear the table over here. But how can I best play this situation? Okay? But the general rule is we're not going to be given a challenge that we're meant to pass without having the ability without God giving us the ability. Actually, there's a beautiful, beautiful explanation in part of the davening. We say the Baruch She'amar prayer. That's the opening blessing of Psukei de Zimra, of the beginning of the morning prayers that we went through earlier. And we say God is Gozer Umekayem. God decrees and fulfills. And there's a story with I forget which Hasidic Rebbe it was. Come back to when I stop trying to think of the name. And he was accused of something, falsely accused of something, and he was thrown into prison, and he was very nearsighted. They took away his glasses. Now, he was known to always daven at a very, very, very slow pace. And here he is in prison, without his glasses. So he said, okay, now I can really daven at a good pace. Now I can really, mull over each word. And he started saying Baruch She'amar. And he comes to these words, Baruch Gozer Umekayem. Blessed is the one who decrees and fulfills. And he stops there and he says, I can't believe it. How have I said these words all my life? I don't understand. What's the great praise that God decrees and fulfills? Right? We expect every person to be a man or a woman of their word. And if you decree something, then you should fulfill it. And he's thinking to himself, oh, that's why God put me in prison over here. That's why God had these people make these crazy, the government these crazy claims. I can gain something over here. And he gave thought and he gave thought and he gave thought. And he said, oh, God is Gozer. He decrees, Umekayem, and he sustains. He gives every person the ability to deal with whatever that decree is. And he said, if I'm in prison now like this, that means that God is giving me the ability to deal with this situation. He's Gozer Umekayem. He makes a decree that I've got to go through a difficult time. Mekayem, he sustains me. He gives me the strength to not just survive it, but to thrive, but to gain from it. And soon after that, he was released from prison. It was mission accomplished. What he needed to gain from that experience, he gained. So that's the general idea, Gabriella. Right? Again, Paro was a unique situation, but for each and every one of us, if we have something that is thrust upon us, if those are the cards that we're dealt, then we have the ability to deal with it in the best way possible. Doesn't mean that we can hand it in and get new cards, right? But we'll be able to best deal with that. So God is Yachid. He is one. Ve'ein yichidut kamo b'shum panim. There is no oneness like him. I mentioned that this morning also, because a lot of these concepts we learned from the Exodus time, and that is that as I quoted Rabbi Sachs on this. Polytheism and monotheism. Polytheism is many gods. There's the rain god, there's the snow god, there's the mountain god, there's the ocean god, there's the sun god, there's the you name it god. Polytheism is not there are many gods, as opposed to monotheism, there is one God. It's not many versus one. It's a whole different world. Meaning. Again, Rabbi Sachs, I said that this morning. People say that science replaces religion. Science replaces polytheism. It's not the rain god, it's the condensation. It's not the wind god, it's the gravitational pulls that cause these different winds and high pressure and low pressure fronts that meet and cause these different tornadoes or strong winds. Right? It's not the ocean god, it's the waves. And there can be an underground, an earthquake, right, on the ocean floor that's going to cause a tsunami, right? So science replaces polytheism. But monotheism is not one God instead of many gods. Monotheism is that there is this all-encompassing God that we say in Kabbalistic terms, God made a halal, he carved out a space where his presence is not overwhelming, and that's the world that we are in. So it's this God, this supreme God that controls every aspect, as we saw in number 1. He's the Borei Umanhig. He's the creator and the one who guides it all. So that is the Yachid, the one. It's not as opposed to many, it's one. It is this one supreme, complete, that we are in his space. We are in his face. And that goes back to what we said before in the introduction. The mitzvot are all ways for us to show our acknowledgement and our respect that we are living in God's world. Kashrut, right? So besides the idea of kashrut, that we are what we eat in the physical sense, that's what science tells us, correct? We also are what we are in a spiritual sense, and there's a spiritual component to these different foods. So when I'm walking into the store and I'm checking to see what certification, and I take out my phone and I'm checking my CRC app, right, to see is this label, is this certification in a recommended certification or not, right? I'm recognizing that I'm living in God's world. Adam and Eve were in God's world, and they overstepped, and they went in to take what they weren't supposed to take. I'm in God's world. I'm in my own Garden of Eden over here. Let me know which are the trees that I'm allowed to partake of and which are the ones that I'm not allowed to. The whole idea is that cognizance, that awareness that I'm not the boss here. I don't get to decide. Right? I'm living here in God's world. As I always say, I go to your house, you invite me to your house, I sit at your table, very good. I don't start opening up drawers and different closet doors. Right? Because I have a respect that this is your space, this is your place. And I'm a guest here. And therefore, I stay within the boundaries of where I'm supposed to be staying. And I don't start overstepping. So hu yachid, he is one, and there's no yichidut kamo, there's no oneness like him, b'shum panim. V'hu levado Elokeinu, and he alone is Elokeinu. Elokeinu means that force, that strength. Haya, hoveh, v'yiyeh. Not that he was, is, and always will be, but he is beyond time. He can be described every moment as was, is, and will be. Gimel number 3. Ani ma'amin b'emunah shalema she'abori baruch shemo eino guf. I believe with absolute faith that the Creator has no corporeality, has no physicality. V'lo yasiguhu masige haguf, and he is not affected by that which affects physical beings. Every physical being, at a certain point, what starts to happen? Age starts to break down, right? Everything physical, so there's the point of it coming about, and then it fades away. Ve'ein lo shum dimyon klal. Now, Rambam, Maimonides, certainly in his Guide to the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, he goes into this super strong, right? No corporeality. There were those who disagreed. Now, let me ask you a question. What does the Torah seem to indicate? What does the Torah seem to indicate? Huh?
No.
I don't know. We hear about God's outstretched arm, the eyes of God. Okay. So we can say they are metaphors. We do say they are metaphors. But this is an example where there were earlier opinions which have not become mainstream Jewish thought that maybe God does have corporeality. The Torah certainly talks of it, right? You want to say it's metaphor. So I'll tell you something amazing that the Rambam says in Moreh Nevuchim. And this relates back to what we said before about Torah and science. The Rambam says, based on his understanding of Torah and his understanding of science, going against Aristotle, because he was very well versed and had a lot of respect for Aristotle, he said that Aristotle was that the world always existed, constant state. And the Rambam says that's not what the Torah says. And scientifically, using his knowledge of astronomy, right, he said that that's not the case. And he used a lot of 11th century astronomy and astrology to bolster his case. Fair enough. But then he says something amazing. He writes, if in the end we will find out that there was not a creation, if it'll be scientifically proven that there was no creation, that won't be a problem for us. What do you mean? How about Bereshit? And he says the same way that we understand God's outstretched arm, God's eyes, God's nose, right? It was a reach nichoach ba'apav, a pleasant aroma, right? The same way that we understand all of that to be metaphorical. And that is written in that way. We say l'saber ta'ozen, in order to bring it down to a level that we can relate and we can understand. Because our understanding is always limited basically to that which is in the realm of our experiences. Right? You ask a child or an adult to draw this creature from out of space. Right? So basically you take things that we're familiar with and you distort it. Give him 18 eyes instead of 2. Give him 32 legs. Right? But we are bound within our own experiences. So therefore, the Torah uses these metaphors as anthropomorphism, which is giving human or physical characteristics to something which does not have physical characteristics, in order to make it within our grasp of understanding. But the Rambam writes, if it will be proven scientifically that the world always existed, that there wasn't a beginning, so we'll have to take Bereshit, the first 6 days of creation. We'll have to take that as a metaphor. No more, no greater leap than all the corporeality that the Torah mentions that we understand to be metaphorical. Okay? So this is an example. But why, right? If when you're meeting with the Beis Din, they ask you, does God have a body? Right? Don't be wise, guys. Okay? All right? Just, right? The clear, accepted, across the board Torah understanding is there is no physicality. And what he says there, and lo yasigu masige haguf, that aspects of physicality don't affect him, right? You know, one of the, I never like to use proofs of God's existence, right? Because you can't physically prove something that is not physical. So within our physical material world, you want to prove things that are beyond that, you're not going to. But there are many indications, we'll call it, right? And one of them is, certainly after studying biology with Devora that summer, the complexity of this world on the macro level, on the micro level, right? You know, things don't, one of the principles is that things become less organized over time, right? And all of a sudden you want to tell me that DNA, which contains the entire genetic code of every cell of every type of cell of the body, is all encoded in there. Right? Our computers can't encode like that. And you want to say that happened on its own, right? Oh, so who made God? So who made God then? Well, in the physical world, the same way that I don't think that this just came about because there was this big storm in Louisiana next to one of the textile mills, and things got blown all around crazy. And some of the black dye got onto some of the cotton, and the zipper got stuck, and then the stitches came, and the tornado was things. And next thing I know, I have a nice sweatshirt, right? Right? That didn't just happen. That didn't just happen. So you say, no, 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 no. Rabbi, don't be silly. That's not alive. But something that's alive, that just happens on its own. And we do see mutations. COVID, right? We see constant mutations. Yes, the way God created this world is that on a on a small level, yeah, the moths went from being black to white, depending on how much soot, was it snow or was there soot, right, where they were flying around. But we've never seen anything, and even I'm fine with evolution. What am I not fine with? Random evolution, where the chances of that happening, of coming up with DNA, is 1 in a billion, 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 billion. But if that's how God chose to orchestrate, that this mutation and that mutation, I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But when we say, so who made God? Well, in the physical world, things need to be made. But as the number 3 says, Eino guf, v'lo yasigu masigeho guf, is not physical, is not affected by physical phenomena. There's no comparison whatsoever to him. So yeah, in the physical, right, this had to be made, right? And this is nowhere, this is nothing. This is not a million as sophisticated as a single cell in my body. Yeah, and no one's going to say that this just came about because there was this big earthquake and the glass and the chips, right? Right? They'll lock you away if you actually believe that, right? Oh, but if it's alive, as if life isn't the greatest miracle of all. If only I could have bought my car when I first got married, and then my car would have gotten older. As I had children and they needed cars, my cars would have given birth, and lots of little cars for my kids to grow to drive, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? I mean, but that's what we accept as natural, as normal. So in the physical world, it just doesn't happen like that. Everything has the beginning, everything has its end, and everything has this number 1, this hanaga, right? When it comes to God, you want to say, who made God? We're in a different realm now. We're not talking about the physical realm. Eino guf, lo masigu masige guf klal. Not physical, not affected by the physical phenomenon, no comparison whatsoever to him. Okay, my friends, it is time. We'll call it over here. Okay? I am away next week, so we will not be meeting next week. Please God, we'll pick up the week after that. I think that will be the 31st. 31st, we'll pick up.
We're just gonna finish this. We're just gonna finish.
We're going to continue working on it. Yeah. We've got 3 out of 13 under our belts. Okay? But these are, like I said, it's important. I spoke about it before you came. It's important to know the halacha, right? Because we're joining the Marines. We need to know what it involves, right? At the same time, right, we have to understand what it is that, right, what are the fundamental beliefs of our people. Okay, my friends, good seeing everybody. We're going to say good night.
Thank
Over
you,
there.
Rabbi.
Good night, good night, good night, good night, good
Thank
night.
you,
Good night,
Rabbi.
everyone.
Good night.
You.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, be well.
Thank you.
Off topic.
Yes. Yeah.
Has to do with